So we're here after this first weekend event, the Riviera seminar here in Montreux, and where we've come together and worked together for the first time as a team of teachers, Nevelius, Daiyu, Takeda, Miles Kessler, and myself. And it was an event, I think, which was very powerful and very nourishing, and I want to thank you guys for making this opportunity a reality. And it seemed to be very fruitful. We didn't really have any themes that we had laid out other than it was going to be a laboratory for Aikido and something along our leading edge of development where we felt we were researching or exploring into. And what seemed to come out was an exploration of center, hara, and of connection. And it was a very kind of fertile and nourishing environment to explore in. And what I enjoyed very much was the sense that we all connected, and yet we were all very much unique at the same time. And the collaboration was extremely enjoyable on my point, as well as I think it got reflected in the group as being something very unified. That's a lot of what I received as feedback from the students in the weekend. But yeah, for me, I was inspired by the contact with you. I think it's quite a challenge for 4 people to come together as Aikido instructors and to be able to bring together that kind of dynamic in a way that is coherent. And so I was very happy with the way things turned out.
First of all, I would like to thank you, Patrick, for making this possible, for putting this together, because you're the one who has been organizing it and yes, making it come true. I'm very grateful for that, and it's been a fantastic experience to work together with all of you.
I'm just thinking of, like, I guess what comes up for me is when you have an ecosystem in nature, it kind of creates an equilibrium or a homeostasis where things kind of stay within the same. But sometimes one ecosystem will kind of come into contact with another ecosystem. And the most interesting place is actually where those ecosystems the boundaries are bumping into each other. Because there's a lot of fertilization and a lot of, sometimes one ecosystem dominates. A desert could take over a forest, or a forest could take over a desert, or whatever. But where they meet, there's actually a lot of dynamic things are happening, changing, falling apart, reorganizing. And it's nice to be able to train, because in one sense, the 4 of us are also little ecosystems, where we have the way we organize our teaching in Aikido, and then when working with each other, there's also those boundaries where we're trying to, the edge of those boundaries are somehow fertile. And my experience has always been that something new always comes out of that. I just get, it's rich, and I always gain benefit out of that points where my Aikido stops and your Aikido begins, and we have this kind of coming together, and something new, a deep learning comes out of that. But the reason I mention that is because I also felt that with the students too, because there were some of your students there, Daiyu, and some of Jan's students there, and Patrick's students. I know your students for much more over the years. But it was really interesting training with different people too, because when we were teaching, we were training, and seeing how negotiating those different ecosystems, not just with teachers it's easier because we have, let's say, the maturity, our interior space has enough, let's say, maturity to hold that, but not necessarily with everybody else in who's growing up in Aikido. And it was nice for me to train with different students and find that there was really this great way to interface, and where there was a little bit of a negotiation of styles or whatever, it always came out in a richer way. And that was kind of my experience of working, of this kind of 4-way round table.
I think the difference in styles oftentimes can be problematic when different groups come together, but I didn't find that to be a problem at all in the seminar that we did. that everybody, despite the stylistic differences, were training in a really open and explorative way, and in a way which they were emphasizing more of the common ground that they shared rather than the differences that they felt, and that I thought was really nice and very important. And I think that's something that we cultivated. As we worked together, that kind of gave permission for the students to fundamentally open those channels between themselves.
I felt my impression was everyone has curious about progressing by oneself. Of course, me too. So everyone wants to develop by ourselves, want to know something unknown beyond of technique, of course, feeling something new. So it's this seminar is a very good guidance to think about something another.
But there was something else too. There was the sense that everybody wanted that for themselves, but I think everybody also wanted that for everybody else too, right? They wanted to support everybody else's process too, which I think is very interesting. Because sometimes you can be in seminars where everybody wants to develop themselves, but they're not really all that interested in supporting somebody else's development. But what I thought was very intriguing was that everybody wanted what you're saying, that sense of I want to discover something new in my Aikido to go beyond technique, but they also were there to support everybody else's process and everybody else's exploration as well, which I think created that wonderful context. But I think we were able to fundamentally be more interested in what was coming up between us rather than trying to emphasize our own agenda over the other instructors, which I think was very important and really actually very nice and enjoyable to share.
We could take it even shift one more kind of move or expand out one more way, and we're also wanting to support Aikido as a living art that's emerging. Because I mean, and you can only support the art that's emerging as if you support yourself, but then we actually start to support each other, and then the art kind of comes out and it emerges in a new way, and it's like a birthing, but it only happens if we give space to it in a way, through that kind of mutual support.
Yeah, I think this. Teaching 4 people is a challenge because we have 4 ways of doing things and thinking and teaching. But I really felt that we all tried to do something together instead of showing just our own Aikido or whatever. But of course we show our Aikido, but I really like this aspect that we try to create something together. And when you create something together, you create something bigger than yourself. Which is, I think, if Aikido is going to survive, Aikido will be bigger than us.
Yeah, I completely agree.
It has to be bigger than us. Otherwise it will die with us or with whoever.
Yeah, and then reducing Aikido to your style, or to your teaching, or to your organization, even. In a way, it kind of goes against the nature of the art. In a way, the art, because like you say, if the principles aren't universal, then they're not really principles. And if Aikido is not if it's not grounded in something that's universal, but rather personal, it could even be just a style, or it could be a huge organization. But if it's an organization that has a name and title and boundaries around it, it's limited, and I agree. I don't think it will survive forever. Like the Roman Empire, it'll rise, it'll fall. And the interesting thing is, if it's organized around universal principles, even if the training falls, the principles don't go anywhere. They're still there. Aikido's always happening.
Well, Jan, you had mentioned sometime during the weekend about how important it is to recognize that no teacher contains the totality of Aikido. It's not possible.
Exactly. This is my experience of view it that Aikido is like life. It's, in my opinion, not possible for one person, maybe all Sensei, but he's not here with us physically. But it's not possible for one person to explain Aikido. We are many people explaining Aikido. We are many people researching Aikido, and so it's, for me, it's not really possible for one person to say this is Aikido.
That would be like one person saying this is love.
Or this is love, or this is life, and it will not work, because life and love and Aikido is bigger than one person.
Exactly.
In my opinion.
Yeah. And I think that's actually a strength. And what's intriguing is that each person's perspective, if it's true and holistic and integral, has a perspective which is without limit. It goes on forever, but yet at the same time, it's not complete.
Its expression will be limited according to that individual.
And so it's framed by the person's interpretation, their experience, their culture, which is actually it's a strength. It's not a weakness when it can be embraced. And I think that's what's very intriguing is the fact that we have all trained in very traditional formats, spending years with teachers that have studied directly with those sensei. And yet at the same time, we are not just repeating the forms that we have learned. We are exploring the relationship that occurs in Aikido. And that's a universe that has no limitation. But even in the forms, there's no limitation. It's actually, it's really staggering how much territory there is to continue to explore, and it just continues to grow. It doesn't get smaller as we practice. It continues to expand as we practice, and that's one thing I think if I could communicate to people new entering into Aikido, that this thing actually gets bigger, and it's not a bad thing. It's not like a loss of. It's just a sense of actually being home in a universe, in an ocean of Aikido, and just not trying to gather it all, but actually just being comfortable exploring it, being able to be at ease with the newness of it, with the unknown nature of it, and comfortable in our own ability to recognize that. And that's what I felt we were all expressing.
For me, it's like where we all come from, traditions, and for me, my teachers are my parents. My parents in Aikido, and I'm forever grateful to my parents. But you also have to go out in life. It doesn't mean that you're not grateful to your parents, but you have to go out in life too. And you still respect your parents, but you have to also enter life. And like Endo Sensei is very important, my teacher, he says, don't be a copy machine. Find out for yourself. And this I listened to many times, and I really think that it's so true. If we just copy something, it doesn't become true. We have to find out for ourselves. So even if our parents, they give us our Aikido life, but then we have to find out for ourselves. There is no other way. Otherwise we'll be copy machines.
And yet at the same time, I think we all value those moments of those. Our first fundamental teacher, my first fundamental teacher, Saito Sensei, was definitely a strict technician with regards to demanding the reproduction of proper movement, or what is considered to be, from his perspective, proper movement. And I appreciated that. It's actually very powerful practice. And I think it was his legacy to kind of formulate that and to keep that. But there were other teachers that moved on in their kind of own evolutionary process, Nishio, Yamaguchi, Endo senseis who moved on, and the teacher that I'm in community with now, Nado Sensei, also mentions that in the very similar vein, that he says, I don't want you to, everybody expresses Aikido like a particular color. Everybody has a own particular color that they express themselves through. And I have my own color, and I don't want you to be my color, I want you to be your color, which requires a certain level of authenticity, a sense of being authentic in the expression of Aikido as yourself, which I think is a strength in the art, which is a radically powerful strength in the art, which you don't see so often in the other martial arts, is this kind of capacity that Aikido allows a person to become authentic in their expression. And I think that's what felt really great in working with you guys this weekend, was that obviously you all expressed yourselves authentically without any need of hiding your light, but that would in no way, shape, or form was that counter or in competition to anybody else's authentic expression. Right? And that's what's so great. It's like I can express myself authentically, and it takes nothing from your expressions. It actually is nourished by being around a different expression, an authentic expression that is about the same territory, but it's a unique expression, and yet there's something universal, as you were saying. These universal principles show up, and that bring us together. But the authentic expressions are unique, naturally so. And that's what was really great to see. I was very inspired by that collaboration. And especially Daiyu, coming out of Japan and being from that culture where Aikido grew from, and from my perspective, you're an extraordinarily open Aikido instructor, and just for who you are, but the fact that even more so, you were brought up in the culture, in the Japanese culture, and you are Japanese, and for you to be able to collaborate in this fashion, I think is a great sign for the future of Aikido, and that's very inspiring for me.
Thank you very much. So during the practice seminar, so Mari said Aikido is not before, not ahead, right now. So it's true. Our expression, onko jishin, so keep warm, traditional way or old stuff, to know something new before and ahead, then we can arrive now. Not only the Aikido movement in a dojo, but also something create new idea through Aikido practice, for the business, for daily life. So it means a good sign to know many styles, many ideas to be one seminar. Now in the middle to go everyone's direction.
What's this word again? Onko jishin?
Onko jishin.
What's this word? What does it mean?
Onko jishin. Warm up, keep warm.
I like
Ko is old,
Yes.
traditional.
On is what?
Kobuzo, yes, ko.
Ataka.
On is
Okay.
warm
So
up,
to preserve, like
keep
preserving
warm,
the
yes.
traditions, to keep warm the traditions.
Preserving the traditions.
Yes, yes.
Keep warm the traditions.
To know.
Ah, cool.
Chi, shin.
So it's where
new.
preserving the styles and
It's where
creating
it's
the
where
new
preserving the
come together.
styles and
Oh, that's
creating
really
the
nice. I
new
like that.
come
I
Yes.
like
together.
that word.
Yes.
Oh, that's really
Yeah,
nice.
in a way that's funny because we can go totally into creativity. Yeah, let's just be creative in the moment, or we can go completely into preservation. That's what our teacher was very much, and God bless him. That was his purpose in life, to preserve what his teacher taught him, what O Sensei taught him, and like you said, Patrick, I did very much appreciate that, but it wasn't necessarily my raison d'etre, because I was always evolving in the art. And I noticed that the people that I was organizing with, that we were kind of evolving together. And I also noticed that the art was even changing. I was with my teacher for some years, and seeing him every day, every year, I actually saw his Aikido changing, over the 8 to 15. I mean, I was with him 8 years, but then maybe 15 years altogether. He was evolving. even though, so, and that was kind of a good representation of onko jishin, maybe a little bit more in the onko, a little bit more preservation with a little bit of evolving. But I never considered myself a preservationist, but at the same time I love the past that we've received. It's good. Sometimes it's just the form that we receive, but it's a beautiful form. And if we don't find the jishin part, this kind of, what is it? Chi. So know the new. So it's like new knowledge.
New knowledge.
New okay.
Wisdom. Yeah.
New wisdom. So the yeah, right. So this chishin, this new wisdom, if it doesn't come out of those forms that we've been past, then it's kind of empty. Then we're just kind of repeating the form. But for me, the most exciting part is we could throw away the forms and just do the chishin, this kind of new wisdom. We could just do that. And that's fun. It's exciting. But the most exciting thing for me is where those two come together and they really kind of create this foundation that we're standing on, and then something new is emerging out of that. And then sometimes we fall back into the foundation, and then something new emerges out of that. Or we emerge a little bit too far, and somehow it's like, whoa, so we go back to the foundation, and we build that up. It's almost like a rocket. For a rocket to go out of the atmosphere, it needs a good solid foundation and fuel to lift off. If the fuel is weak, or if the foundation is weak, then it just can't do it. So it's almost like we need the structure for something new, for this chishin. I love this word. Leave it to Japan to find one word or 4 kanji to really express something very relevant.
In all of what we explored today, that quality of being center to center, moving as one, or that quality of feeling that pearl inside and moving from that pearl, which impacted our relationship, or the nature of that recognition of that contact point, and that contact point being a doorway that fundamentally facilitated connection. There were shifts that we all introduced that suddenly gave people a new perspective. It wasn't about adding a slow adding on of information, which increased, a slow development. It was like a window into a new way of looking at Aikido that could give a person a leap into a different way of relating, that allowed for a person to suddenly get a taste that supported shifts of development, shifts of new capacity. So there's something in that way. There's a little kind of a magical quality about the exploration. It's not just elbows here and shoulders down and heart out. There's no that kind of slow developmental practice that takes time to get in, and which is part of that repetition of form. But this kind of like suddenly recognizing, wow, I'm not out here, I'm here. And that flip of attention can change so much. Or I'm not here, I'm here with my partner. Or I'm not back here, I'm suddenly here. And we're all fundamentally introducing ways for the students to suddenly kind of get a new window onto the art, which then can suddenly drop the person into a completely different perspective, which those, what we say in English, the aha moments, right? Little satori that allows for a shift in experience, a shift and also expression of Aikido. And that's what I think is very inspiring, is to be able to facilitate that, because you can't do it for a student, but you can facilitate that. You go out there and you do it with them, and you do it. You give them metaphors. You give them places to drop their attention. You show them the golf ball. You show them tango. You show them wakame. You show them something, right? That suddenly they go, aha, and it's relevant. If it's not relevant, it's some type of conceptual aha. And a conceptual aha is nice. Aikido is, making the world into one family. Okay, that's a conceptual aha. Generally, it's a conceptual aha. But when you see that, or when you see something that drops into your body, into your being, and you go, aha, I feel what you're saying. I see what you're saying, I understand it, but I also feel it. Not only can I feel it, I can actually access it.
When I listen to you, I think about what connects to what I'm very inspired by, this idea of simplifying.
Yeah, right.
Which could become like purifying also. And there is a saying, that teachers add things, masters remove
Things away.
things.
Yeah, right, yeah.
So the teacher will add a lot of information, but the master will remove what should not be there. And sometimes I feel like I'm swinging, sometimes I'm teaching, sometimes I'm removing. But in some, I'm trying to move towards removing.
Right, yeah.
It's I feel that there's an inspiring, that what can we remove from what is just there? So that the student finds it, aha, now I feel this is very easy, it's very simple. And that is because you have removed everything that doesn't need to be there.
Yeah, extraneous.
And this connects to, it's another way of expressing maybe the same thing as you're saying. And I think that we're all touching this, or I don't know about you, but I felt like in the seminar we were trying to remove things and trying to come to simplicity.
And I think we have those windows where we're working on something specific that for us is just so simple, and yet so wonderful because it's so big. It's simple, but it's not simplistic. It's simple in its approach because it's universal, but it fundamentally leads to a capacity to explore a vast expression of different things within the art, and that's what gets so exciting as well. And in that way, I think Aikido, and not to take that title on, but to use your metaphor, from teachers, it's oftentimes very sophisticated, very complicated. Masters, it's much more simple, but masters, at that level of expression, I feel like the person leading the class is more facilitating rather than teaching. Is encouraging the person to kind of make a shift and making the shift in front of the students. And so this is how it works, and demonstrating that, and then encouraging people to make that shift on their own. And then when they do, it suddenly becomes theirs. It suddenly becomes part of who they are.
To be simple, or to know something new, is mostly very similar or same aspect of all senses teaching. Not only technique. Technique is Aikido. No, so all including key daily life, another everyone's feeling, including, of course, nature, back to basic, or remind, refreshing.
Similar to what Jan was saying about the universal nature of it.
Yes.
If it's not universal, if it doesn't really impact all of our life, somehow. If it doesn't impact all of our life, then it's like something like golf or something. It's just a thing that we do. It could be beautiful, but it's not. It doesn't have that universal nature to it, or the universal aspect, which I think Aikido does. I think Aikido is resting. Whatever Aikido is, it's resting on that.
It seems to have a unifying principle about it. Something that
Doesn't always seem that way.
But when we explore it, it seems to have that capacity to be a unifying principle. That one equation that brings everything down into a relationship with life itself.
Yeah. And again, that brings in the duality again, because we're all human beings. We all have our personalities, and as do our teachers, and quite often, I mean, our teachers are, as I know all of you, me too, we have the greatest respect and love for our teachers. But often there were times of their personality like, well, okay, that's not universal. That's somehow, there's a boundary there, there's a limitation there. And I was always okay with that because I was looking, even though I was following my teachers, I wasn't following everything about their life. I was following this universal expression that they were bringing through. And I also realized that kind of helps me see my own human limitations, and not to get confused that when something universal does come through, something in me is allowing it to come through, but I can't take ownership of that. I can't say it's me. There's just no way to do it.
And it doesn't mean that everything I do then suddenly is fundamentally expression of that unifying principle.
And the Sensei really has this ability to create, always ends with Juvasa. It's like creates this space for research for yourself, and he has this question, why? Why? It's like a Zen koan,
Sure.
Why are we doing this? Why do I feel this? Why do I? And of course, maybe there is no answer, but the question is pushing you. And I like that question, why?
It creates that doorway into the unknown.
Yes, it puts you in a space where it's not fixed. It's an exploration, and I'm grateful for that space he creates with this Juvasa and the question of leaving you to your own experience.
But Nado Sensei had commented that O-Sensei was always saying, it's just so simple. It's just so simple.